All right, good afternoon, everybody. You made it over to Facebook for our lunch break. This is our third Slow Food lunch break where we take some time out of the day to talk to people in our local food community who are working toward good, clean, and fair food for everybody. As you may have noticed with the pandemic going on, a lot of people have started baking bread. And so we thought we'd bring on two experts to talk about a question that's been on a lot of people's mind. Where's all the flour gone? And that being said, I'd like to introduce you to two really amazing flour people today. The first is James Brown. James is joining us from Barton Springs Mill down in Central Texas, home of a lot of really amazing flour. And we've also got Stephanie Leichtle-Chalklen from Cthulhu Bakery in Oak Cliff, right?
Kuluntu Bakery, yes.
Kuluntu.
Yes.
Perfect. It's a tongue twister this morning. So, Stephanie, why don't you go first and just tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how you're involved with the bread community here in Dallas.
Great. I am the owner and baker of Kuluntu Bakery. So just a little bit of background, how we even came up with this name. Kuluntu means community in Xhosa, which is a South African language. And that's where Kuluntu Bakery actually started. My husband's South African, so we were living in Cape Town. After being in New York and working in some professional bakeries there, we launched our own thing in Cape Town. And then in 2018, we moved to Dallas and brought the business with us. And really the mission behind it is building community through baking and breaking bread. We specialize in sourdough bread, we bake lots of bread, we have our weekly pickups. But we also focus on communal events, which is a little hard to do right now, but we do sourdough classes and we host a South African supper club. Mostly it's related to baking, but we also break bread together. And the whole idea is just building this communal aspect around food, around a shared meal. And my specialty happens to be bread. So that's what we're doing. And I do just want to say one thing. The context is really challenging right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of this, racial violence and everything that's happening. So I think from us, our focus is on building community. So I just want to acknowledge what's happening right now. And I know it doesn't completely relate to this conversation, but I think it would be, I think we just need to acknowledge what's happening. And I think that's kind of our work, what we're doing too.
Well, thank you for that, introducing yourself like that. And also thank you for acknowledging what's going on in the world, because the level of inequality, isn't just about food, it's about everything. And in order for, us to have a healthy society, all parts of our society have to be equal and have to have fairness in the way that we're treated in many different ways. Slow food is focused obviously on availability of good, clean, and fair food, but healthy communities start there, but they don't end there. So thank you for that, Stephanie. Really appreciate it. And James, did you want to tell us a little bit about Barton Springs Mill? I'm a big fan. I like cool flour. I was so excited to actually be looking at some wholesale flour yesterday for some projects of my own. But why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit of how you got into this and what Barton Springs Mill is all about?
Sure. My name is James Brown, the proprietor of Barton Springs Mill. We are in our third year of production as a flour mill dedicated to regionally grown and sourced grains, stone milled. As a former chef, I wanted to get back into food after a long hiatus, but decided, that I could probably make a greater impact somewhere other than standing on the hot line at 55 years old, that there might be some better way for me to contribute. And I'd become a big hobbyist baker and found that I couldn't get the kind of grains milled the way I want them really anywhere within my region. And so my second career or third career found me. So that's a little bit of the background. We just moved into a new facility. We're in the middle of harvest right now. We're going to be bringing in somewhere around between 275 and 300 tons of wheat and rye in the next 3 weeks. And I guess I would also like to echo Stephanie's sentiments that it's for very many reasons a very painful time, and that I would challenge. One of the things we talked about are calls to action that we could leave people with today, and I think the most important one that we could ask people to do is to be attentive and sensitive listeners.
I think that's good advice for all occasions. I think listening is definitely the thing that Americans are the worst at sometimes. I want to go ahead and say hello to a couple people that are watching here. We've got a lot of people from Coppell that are here.
My hometown.
Yes, and big fans of somebody from Las Colinas here as well. Amanda's watching while eating lunch. Somebody from Lakewood here. And a question right out of the gate of where can we get these flowers from Barton Springs Mill? And I guess the obvious one is online. Is there anywhere locally that we can give somebody a quick answer for on that one?
Local right now is the best. We're expanding into the Dallas market in Central Market.
Wow,
we'll be
cool.
in the Lovers Lane location, and there's some other stuff coming. I'm not at liberty to say yet, but it'll be more because the deal's not done. But it will be more broadly available in a grocery store near you.
Oh, well, that's good. That's always really good news. Yeah. Top secret flower news. You heard it here first. Not really. Keep an eye out for that. So let's go ahead and kick off this conversation. You know, we brought you here today to talk about this pandemic that we're having. We've got a sudden flour shortage in American grocery stores. And I think those of us that are in the greater food and beverage business that buy from wholesalers know that there's actually a lot of flour around right now because production is down in restaurants and in bakeries across the country. But, you know, when me and my wife wanted to bake a lot of bread when we were stuck at home for the last 3 months now, it seems like, we bought a 50-pound bag from a local distributor because we couldn't find it at the grocery store either. So let's talk a little bit about the flour supply chain. What's going on? Where's all the flour?
I think you're right. For the most part, there's not a shortage of wheat at the very least, and in many instances, not a shortage of flour. But it's just a supply chain issue, and the ability of a big organization to be able to respond nimbly to unforeseen circumstances. You know, you have the centralization of flour production. So, for example, there used to be a mill here in Austin. There used to be multiple mills in Dallas and even in McKinney, and even in a small town that no longer exists just outside of McKinney, Roscoe. All had local mills, and because of the size and locale, they were able to be much more nimble and responsive. Now you have fewer companies, maybe milling in given regions, but we were going into the springtime, which is typically a low supply or low demand time of the year. So companies are adjusting their inventories in order to not have product sitting on the shelves, or more importantly, not paying for product that's sitting in warehouses when this pandemic began. And to suddenly turn that big machine around and get back into production mode, get things bagged and to the various distribution points is difficult and takes time.
Yeah, I can understand that. How has your mill been able to respond to this? Have you seen a huge uptick in demand? You know, I mean, how much volume were you going through before? Is this a fairly large operation? And I guess it's hard to understand the scale of a flour mill. That's what I'm trying to ask here.
Yeah, and we certainly got taxed there in the height of demand, sort of in the month of April. Things got really pretty crazy. We were predominantly doing wholesale to restaurants and bakeries and doing some online sales. The wholesale part of the business completely evaporated. But on a good week, let's say between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we were doing between 30 and 60 online orders a week, which is not bad. Given that it's not our primary focus. In the month of April, we were getting 300 orders a day we were milling approximately 30,000 pounds of flour every week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So not just an uptick in flour here, but sort of an uptick in like locally produced flour, which I think is really cool. One of the neat side effects here, I guess, has been that, not just that people are baking and in their kitchens again, but they're using quality products. Stephanie, I want to let you jump in here, and I have a question about how these flours, sort of react when you're baking, but also, how your customers react to using this kind of local product.
Yeah, well, I think just using this super high quality fresh flour from Barton Springs Mill, I mean, it makes my bread really delicious. I love Barton Springs Mill, and I think I'm making the best bread I've ever made before because of their flours. And it definitely, when I'm working with the dough, like I said, I'm mostly doing sourdough, and my dough just feels very much alive. And that's because of this fresh flour. As far as people working with it, so I actually teach sourdough classes, and I've been doing a lot of virtual sourdough baking because everybody wants to learn how to bake sourdough right now. And people are really, I think their eyes are really opening up to the power of this fresh local flour. People just relied so much on the grocery store flour, the powder white flour. And there's just not very much education behind why that's not very good for you, why local is just always better, and just how much it impacts your bakes. So it's been cool. Like I'm always telling people in my classes about Barton Springs Mill, and then when they get some, they're raving about it. So it's been really cool to see that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I've got a question here up on the screen for you from Roger, asking if you can bring his chefs to the bakery after COVID-19 is over. I assume you like guests.
So I do teach in-person classes. I'm a cottage bakery, so it's all in my home. And yeah, I do in-person classes. So yes, it's just going to be a while longer since it's our home until we're going to.
Yes. And it may be a little while longer for COVID. It's looking like, unfortunately. Definitely.
But yeah,
might be good for bread bakers. Very good, very good. We've got a couple questions here about the flour themselves. One of them I'll put up here on the screen is asking if these are organically grown grains. But I want to extend that question a little bit further, James, before you jump into it, and really ask if you could describe the difference between, commercial flour, that I think maybe it's like a roller milled flour, right, versus what you're doing stone ground, because, I think a lot of the differences start there. Obviously, the grains are different too. So maybe you could answer both of those for us.
Sure. I think the biggest thing that sets us apart is the how few chain links there are in the chain from growing to production for us. For example, right now we're in harvest. We are getting stuff directly off the combine brought here. We're toting it. That means putting it in these 1-ton bags, and then we're sealing it in another bag and filling it with CO2. That means it didn't go to an intermediate cleaning facility and an intermediate storage facility where lots of things happen to that grain in order to keep it insect free. Usually being sprayed with storicides, for example, or being treated with diatomaceous earth or any number in an organic system, for example. We're skipping all of those steps, and every step of the way, from the agriculture and the growing of the grain all the way to commercial production of bread, chemicals are finding their way into the system. And I think for people who have some sort of gluten sensitivity, that's where a majority of the issue is. A lot of people place their focus on the grain varieties, but I'm sort of echo Steve Jones from the University of Washington, who says, modern wheats can be healthy and good and delicious too. It has to do with how they're treated as much as it is the variety. But to backtrack for a second, commercial roller milled flour, the wheat comes into the facility, and the first thing that happens is it is tempered. That's a process where a mist of water is applied to the grain as it's being put into a tempering tank, and that's conditioning the bran. They're raising the moisture content in the bran, which makes it tough and leathery. That way, when they go to the milling process, it comes off in much bigger pieces, which are easy to remove. So after this tempering process, which is usually overnight or a considerable number of hours, it goes through a first break. And this is a set of rollers that move towards each other at a very high speed. They have corrugations on them. They're sharp. And what happens is the grain literally explodes, and they are able to almost immediately segregate the germ, the bran, and the endosperm, the white starchy part, in that first, what they call a break. Then they can then take the constituent parts back through more series of rollers, in most instances only the endosperm, to break that down into finer and finer pieces, and it'll alternate between breaks and sieves or sifting to get that super fine, super white flour that we're accustomed to in the store. Then in many instances, when you buy whole wheat flour, what they will do is they will reintroduce the bran to the endosperm. So you've got two parts of the wheat berry there, but in many instances, they don't re-include the germ because the germ contains the germ oil. Germ oil tends to go rancid, and it significantly reduces the shelf life of white flour, which can be on the shelf or in storage for months and months and months before it makes its way to your home. By contrast, what we're doing is we're putting whole berries into a stone mill, and we're grinding those between two stones. Some of it we do sift, but we've already ground up that germ and expressed the germ oil into the endosperm. So you get the nutrition and the flavor of that. Also, our system by design is not a very efficient one. So we cannot, even in our whitest flour, remove all of the bran. So a fair amount of the bran does remain. It will make a whiter product, but it is higher in nutrition and higher in flavor than commercially produced roll milled flour.
Wow, that's super interesting. So, I mean, we're not talking about just like the locality of it and the difference in grains, but like the whole process here is pretty different from what you're used to. And the flours come out fairly different. I mean, we're talking about the germ oil there and, it being removed or, not let in the first place, I guess, in these commercial flours due to shelf life. So what are the shelf life differences here with something like your flours, James?
I advocate that people use our flour within 2 to 3 months maximum at room temperature, 6 months if you put it in an airtight container and freeze it. But that old adage about the shoemaker's children always running around barefooted. My wife has stuff in our cupboard at home that still has our old label on it, which we haven't had for 6 months. And she will use it because she won't waste anything. Never mind that I could bring home a carload of wheat. It still ended up being good. It was not rancid. The germ oil had not oxidized and gone rancid. But I don't advocate that. I don't. We guarantee every bag of flour that goes out of here. So I want people to be happy. I want them to have a good experience. And with the immediacy that we can get flour out the door, we're willing to order for folks. Part of the joy and reward in this is to be able to use freshly milled flour and appreciate those differences. So don't buy a bunch and sit on it. Buy a little and buy often.
I like that idea. That's always good for any local producer, right? Is to buy things consistently from the producer so that they know the paychecks come in and they know that they can keep their supply chain going all the way down. We've got a couple questions about the growers, one about just sort of what they're doing. So, specifically the question is, are all of these grains organic? And of course, organic is kind of a little bit of a loaded word, but I don't know what the answer is here.
Yeah, and it's a loaded word for me too, and I'll tell you why. So every one of my farmers is an organic farmer. They are certified either through the Texas Department of Agriculture or a third party. However, we just moved into our new facility, and our facility is not certified. Never mind that every grain that comes in the door is organic. I have yet to be certified. So when it crosses my threshold, it loses its organic certification.
Indeed.
I'm given the circumstances right now, I'm not sure I'm going to do anything about that. I think I'm simply going to say, we're super transparent. I put the names of my farmers on our website. If you walk into our facility, you can walk up to any bag and it has the name of the farmer on it, among a lot of other information. And I think that's what people are looking for. I'm perfectly fine not having certified organic on my bag.
I think that's a good way to look at it. You're revealing everything else. You're not trying to hide anything. So, I think that sometimes, the movement can hide behind words that seem really useful, like organic, and in reality, it doesn't really always mean what we think it means. Stephanie, I want to kick it over to you. We've got a question from the audience asking what kind of flour that you're using for your sourdough.
Right now, I'm using the Ruby Lee whole wheat, but I've used quite a few varieties. I've used the Yacora Rojo, what was I just using? Turkey Red, used Red 5, and then I also used the Renza Bruzy Rye. So I am using both of those in my sourdough.
And can you describe just a little bit of, when we talk about there's differences, right? And one of the differences obviously is oil content, protein content, you're getting a different product. But can we talk about a little bit more of the aesthetic differences and the qualitative differences? How do they smell and taste and feel? And, really, if we can give people an idea of what it would be like to work with these flours and kind of the differences that we get from them.
Yeah. When I get a bag of Barton Springs Mill flour, I think like the first thing is, especially when I'm transferring it to my other container, is that it feels moister. And I assume that's the germ oil, but it just like, it's not as dry feeling. And like I said earlier, my dough feels really alive. And I think the flour feels that way too. And as far as smell, it's, very earthy. It smells it's a really beautiful smell. You don't smell that with supermarket flours. And then working with it, like every flour is a little bit different. So they tend to be thirstier grains. And so I have to use quite a bit of water, which is actually makes a better bread when you know how to do a high hydration sourdough. So they're pretty thirsty, but they're all a little bit different. And so I'm always having, like when I do try a new variety, I always have to kind of, tailor it to that and maybe add a little bit more water. And that also just kind of goes into the intuition of bread making. The more you do it, the more you learn and the more you feel confident and comfortable working with this live dough. So that's how, I'm able to tailor it whenever I get a different type of flour from them.
That's so interesting. So, you really are getting kind of a different product here. Have you noticed that it changes dramatically from one variety to another? Can you, like, if you hold two different loaves of bread that you made the same way but use different flours, are they wildly different, or is it largely kind of in the same thing?
For me, the ones I've picked haven't been wildly different, but I'm also picking the varieties that have a higher protein content because I also use all-purpose flour, which is a lower protein content. So I try to balance it out. But I'm sure, probably James could tell you more. I'm sure, like if you're using a different one, I'm sure there's some pretty big differences.
Yeah, I would say, one of the things that I say when I have to deal with people who want to help us with our marketing and stuff, and I'm forced to say something is, that before now, bakers, had a palette and it had one little dot of paint on it and it was beige. Or maybe it was Snow White, in fact. and now we're giving the artist a palette that has more colors on them. When we do baking classes here at the mill, one of the things we'll do is we'll feed people lunch and we'll have bread a single variety of every type of hard red winter wheat we have, and then we'll have some other specialty items as well.
Oh, cool.
All made exactly the same way, straight sourdough, just flour, water, and salt. So people can really appreciate the difference, because later in the class, they get to make their own blend, sort of like blending wine. So they'll blend the flours together to get what they think they want out of a loaf. But they definitely have different flavor and aroma profiles, different colors. They can be very, very different. And when we're evaluating new wheat varieties to bring on, I'm always looking for something that adds something new to the portfolio, a new flavor, a new aroma, a new texture, something, because I don't want sameness. That's not interesting to me.
I like that's so refreshing to hear businesses trying to do things differently instead of just doing the same thing over and over again. We have a question here from the audience. If you're going to be offering classes online, James, I guess you have a Barton Springs Mill Sourdough Baking Workshop, asking if it's going to be available for remote participants. I guess they wouldn't be able to taste the bread remotely.
We don't have a live option right now. We do. One of the things that in our old facility, we had a little teeny tiny bakery so that we could do R&D. We could have bakers and chefs come in and do product development with us in our space. But it became, and I've got bakers who work for me who are millers and working in our retail space and doing other things that are have professional experience. But it became clear to me I really wanted to have somebody under the same roof as us that was a professional baker. So we are building a 2,500 square foot bakery, and we've leased that to Abby Love, a local baker who's going to be operating that space, and she's going to be working exclusively with our products. So it gives us a immediacy of knowing when we're on the right track and when we're not. But it also gives us, between her and my staff, a core of sort of Bread 101 instructors that we can then complement. We did build an education center, 1,000 square foot education center. It has an oven, and it has benches and work tables right now. And the COVID reality, it's our fulfillment center. So I saw that Amanda was asking a question about how are small organizations able to be nimble. Well, we were able to tailor our facility to the needs at hand and be able to, because we're small, we are able to do it quickly. That's one of the ways. But yeah, we do have an online. Abby Love has an instructional video online right now on our YouTube channel that shows a basic sourdough that you can watch. And we're talking about the possibility of some live scenarios. But right now we have some things on YouTube that people can look at if they're looking for instruction.
Oh, well, that's the wave of the future, right? Whoever needs to see each other ever again. I mean, just go to YouTube for everything.
It's not quite the same.
No, for sure. Stephanie, I want to ask you the same question that Amanda's asking about small companies. You know, you're obviously a small scale baker yourself. And why do you think that the small guys have really been having a moment right now? What is it that's going on?
Yeah, I think that it's very similar to what's happening with the flour situation. We're just able to react quicker. So for myself, I'm the baker, and my husband helps me with a lot of other stuff, but it's just us two. And so any changes that we need to make, which obviously there's been a ton of changes for us. We've really revamped a lot of things as far as our business. We have 2 delivery days or pickup days instead of 1 pickup day. We're doing a lot more bread. And now we're actually teaching online. So all of that stuff we were able to do quickly because it's just us two. And also, I think it does take some foresight too. So when things started to happen with the pandemic here, things started to shut down. I think for us, we were more on the front end of it than I think some businesses were. We knew that this was going to impact us a lot. We weren't in denial of it. And so we quickly revamped everything and communicated that effectively, I think. And also in this time, what's interesting, I think, is For us, we've been always thinking about the customer and like what is safe, because that's also a big part of this whole pandemic. What is safe? How do we keep our customers safe? How do we keep us safe? And so thinking about that and really making our efforts align with everybody's safety, I think people appreciated that a lot. And that's how we got even more support. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people like to feel like they're heard, and unfortunately, a lot of these big companies have too many customers. I think that there's just sort of a level of being able to pay attention to what people really really want. And James, I know you're talking a little bit about the small businesses, and in that earlier, I wanted to ask you a question about your growers, and Amanda wants to know where the wheat is grown. Is this all, what regions is this coming from? And, are these farmers growing for other people? Are they growing for you? How does that lay out in the landscape of farming?
It's been a changing landscape for me. When I initially started, I worked with farmers all over the state. Frankly, people who, I was frantic and worried I was not going to get anybody who was going to buy into what I was doing, which was, offering them a fair price for wheat and rye, asking them to grow these heirloom varieties, which are less disease resistant and have other, pest and disease pressures and potential issues with lodging, falling over because of they're not dwarf varieties. So I would, I was working with who would work with me. Some of those people worked out, some of them didn't. I would say the majority of my farmers are farmers that, we live in Texas. So cotton and oil are king in the state of Texas. So these guys grow organic cotton. They generally will grow also organic peanuts as part of a rotation. And then they need a winter cover. And they've been growing forage rye, forage wheat, something simply to control erosion and to help keep the soil balanced, especially after usually following nuts, and perhaps the application of organic nitrogen in the form of composted manure or kelp or seafood product. And so suddenly someone came along and offered them money for something that was simply fulfilling a function for them. And I still have some of those farmers. I've held on to those, and they've done a fantastic job. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them. But as time has progressed, I've also taken on farmers who grow with a higher degree of focus on grain production. The farmer that grows ruby leaf, for us example, is a fourth generation wheat farmer in Alva, Oklahoma. And I really had no designs on working with any farmers outside the state until I met him, and he made a very compelling and strong argument merely on the beauty and the performance of the wheat that he's producing. I think that leadership by example is now sort of spilling over and rubbing off on some of my other producers, and that they're exchanging information and finding ways to, bring in higher protein levels, higher yields without affecting the quality. And all of those things are important. Right now, they're spread all over the state. As I said, I have one in Oklahoma. I have one in Tokyo, Texas, just outside of Brownfield, two in Lamesa, which is also close to Brownfield, one in Miles, just outside of San Angelo. Then I have two local farmers, one here in Rockdale, just east of Austin, and one in New Braunfels, which is just south of Dripping Springs, where the mill is located. And that farmer is responsible for growing our Rouge de Bordeaux, which is our most popular wheat variety, hard red winter wheat variety right now.
Wow, that's so cool. We have a quick question about the wheat specifically, wanting to know if the protein and gluten content is available for all of your grains, if they can look that up on your website.
Yep. As part of that transparency, if you go to the website, you go to any variety, on the variety page, it will show you the name of the farmer, protein level, falling number, and we can provide, I'm hoping maybe we'll get this actually done where you don't have to ask. But we run, which is pretty rare for a mill our size, we run farinograph on all of our varieties. And I'd like to get it where there's a clickable link so that they can grab that PDF. You have to know how to interpret a farinograph. which is
I don't know what a farina graph is. What is that? That sounds like something complicated and Italian.
It's not that complicated in terms of the methodology. So they take a small amount, a measured amount of wheat and flour, and mix them into a paste, and they place them in a tube. Then they insert a piston inside that tube that just fits inside the diameter of the tube, and they count the number of seconds that it takes for that piston to fall all the way to the bottom. And that number is the falling number. And what it is indicative of is the enzymatic activity in a given sample. So you have alpha and beta amylase enzymes that are naturally occurring in the wheat. And their job is to take the starch that's in the berry and convert that to a sugar that the germ, the embryo, can eat and consume in order to send out the root and the shoot that's going to come out before it's able to start absorbing nutrients from the ground around it. It's also super important in the making of artisan bread without the addition of any other inclusions like malted barley or diastatic malt powder, because it helps to convert those sugars that the yeast and organisms in the sourdough starter consume, but it also helps with things like Maillard reaction or the browning when you're baking the bread, and the sweetness of the bread. If you get sprout damage, meaning too much rain close to harvest, those enzymes can be activated and then they're not available anymore once it's made into flour. You can also have very dry circumstances, which we get sometimes in more arid areas where there's just not a lot of enzymatic activity. And so knowing that what the level is in a given sample can direct the baker in how to treat that, whether it's going to be an extended autolyse period or maybe the inclusion of some enzymes that are going to help. There are good and healthy and organic ways to do that. But a lot of people ask for the data and then write back and ask, well, what am I supposed to do with the data?
How do I read this?
That's the fun of our close circle of bread geeks and the learning as part of this adventure.
The deeper you get into anything food or beverage, the more and more it feels like science class, which is why I got into food and beverage in the first place. So you're talking my language here. That's my love language is diastatic malt powder. There's amazing things to bread, and apparently you don't need it as much in these flours. That's really exciting. Stephanie, we were talking earlier before the broadcast started, and really just sort of had this question of like, why is it bread that everybody's focused on right now? And I was hoping we could take a crack at that because, it seems like in these kinds of emergencies, people come together in a lot of different ways. And of course, we've all been separated and haven't been able to come together the way that we want to. But, some of the things that we've been seeing, other than the flour shortage in the grocery stores, there's a yeast shortage in the grocery store. There's also a lot of people planting victory gardens. There's a lot of newfound excitement about community gardens and these kinds of things. What is it about the loaf of bread that makes people feel all warm and fuzzy inside, I guess? What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think it's just that. I think it makes people feel warm and fuzzy. I think it's very much a comfort food. And I think people have been needing comfort during this time. And I also think that it can make so many meals and it can be easy. So there's a lot of mouths to feed right now. There's whole families are home with kids and they're just trying to feed the kids quickly. So they make a sandwich. So that's kind of what I've thought, is that I think that it's an easy meal and it's comforting. And also just like from a personal perspective, my husband eats a lot of bread. It's like
husbands are good at that. Yeah.
Food. You should see how much bread he eats. It's crazy, but it's also like a very quick and easy meal for him. He goes, whacks off a piece of bread, and that's his snack. So that's kind of what I thought is maybe why bread in particular has been so popular during this time. And I also think as far as learning it, because there's been so many people wanting to learn how to bake this artisanal bread, I think maybe people have been wanting to learn for a while and have gotten intimidated, and they've seen like, oh, it's such a long process. I have to work. I don't have time for this. And now they do have time for it, and they're home and they can, go do their folds during bulk fermentation. And, they just have a little bit more time and patience for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the first thing that came to my mind at the beginning of this pandemic was that Americans are suddenly going to be able to experience like European levels of leisure, perhaps for the first time, in most of our lives. And it's led a lot of people to doing things that are very time consuming, I mean, my wife has been baking for some time, and it was very amateur up until this started, and now is suddenly like a total bread rock star. And it's really just, the availability of time, but also like it seems like everybody's doing it, and people are really jumping on board. James, did you want to add anything? I mean, you're surrounded by sort of the main ingredient here of the conversation all the time.
Yeah, we've been posting stuff on YouTube and on Instagram. I made my first loaves of bread last week that I had made in the last year, wow. Which is just really sad given my occupation. All of my wholesale clients give me bread all the time. My delivery driver comes back with more bread than I can possibly consume. So I'm not so motivated to make bread when people that make bread better than me give it to me for free. That being said, I really have missed the endeavor. And also, Abby and I have sort of been working on this YouTube channel on sort of separate tracks. She's sort of giving the textbook way to build a starter and maintain a starter and take care of it, and then how to work with it. And then in my parallel, I'm abusing my starter, neglecting to feed it, show how long you can go without feeding it and it's still viable, just to show people that, look, yes, in an ideal situation, you would want to do it this way, but these things are relatively resilient, and you don't need to be quite so freaked out about it. Just relax. You're going to make better bread than you were getting in the store before this whole mess started. Just lean into it and enjoy it. Then, as luck would have it, I was trying to make bread around a Zoom with my wife's family, and put in half the amount of starter that was supposed to go into a bread recipe that I was doubling. So I showed people that, okay, it's simply going to need to rise longer. It's going to have a longer retard. And I wanted to go to bed, so I retarded it in the refrigerator overnight, picked up where I left off the next day.
Probably
you
awesome.
can, what's going to be important, I think, in coming months as people return to some sense of normalcy is hopefully the takeaway that, yes, it was great while we were all sitting home and had all of this leisure time, but the advanced baker can learn to make the bread conform to their schedule. And my hope is that through that they continue baking even after they have to go back to the office, or they have to go back to some sense of normalcy.
That is a great message. Get comfortable with your food. It's not something that you have to. Everybody's so afraid of cooking, which I spent most of my life as a chef and in restaurants. It was a huge advantage for me. But now it's like people like, don't be afraid of your food. This is we're friends. We're friends with the food. Y'all, this has been really fun. I want to give you an opportunity to let everybody know where they can find you online and follow the amazing things that you're doing before we leave today. So whichever one of you wants to kick off with that, and then we'll say goodbye.
Oh,
Go for it, Stephanie.
You can find all the information about my bakes and classes on my website. That's kuluntubakery.com. There it is, down below.
There you go.
And also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, it's all under Kuluntu Bakery. For our bread pickups that we do twice a week, we do Tuesday and Thursday evening, and it's pickup in Oak Cliff right near Bishop Arts. And we have a mailing list that we send out every Saturday with that menu. So if you want to join that, you can just email me. All of that's on the website too. So.
Awesome. Yeah, very good. And James, I've got bartonspringsmill.com here. I guess, is it at Barton Springs Mill on all the social as well?
Yeah, at Barton Springs Mill for Instagram and for Facebook, at Barton Springs M on Twitter. Yeah, check us out. We also on Barton Springs Mill on YouTube, where you can see those hopefully entertaining and sometimes comical parallel instructional videos between me and Abby. And we're trying to load additional ones weekly, so check those out.
Very good. Very good. Well, I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining us today and talking about flour and bread and the things that we're all passionate about here.